everybody, and a very warm welcome to Estoril, just outside Lisbon in Portugal, for the fourth race of the 2015 International GTOpen season. We are here on an absolutely glorious day to conclude the second of 7 stops around some of Europe's finest circuits, which will comprise the GTOpen season. Well, it's a very warm welcome from myself, Ben Evans, to a sizzling day in Estoril, where we've got a large crowd coming to enjoy the thunder of the International GTOpen, and as well they might, because if you didn't join us yesterday, we had an absolutely thrilling race that went all the way to the wire, which was eventually claimed by Ezequiel Perez-Compenac and Raffaele Giammaria, despite a charging drive from Alessandro Balzan in the Villorba course Ferrari. Well, they had qualifying for the race this morning, and it is Balzan who was right to the front of the field in the Villorba course car that he shares with Nicola Bonucci. Pole position just for Balzan by under 1/10 of a second from the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren 650S of Alvaro Parente, the Portuguese driver, enjoying racing in front of his home fans alongside compatriot Miguel Ramos. And Parente could be relied upon for a spectacular drive, but his attempt to move around the outside at the Parabolica at the end of yesterday's race was quite something. Third on the grid, the Lamborghini Gallardo of the AERT team, and Alvaro Barber right at the sharp end of the field. Great to see that car going so strongly. Slightly muted performance yesterday from Michele Rugolo and passing the Thores en route to 7th place. They and the AF course will be hoping for a bit more from today. Yesterday's race winner, Ezequiel Perez-Compenac, lines up in 5th place in the second of the AF course Ferraris. Alongside him is the Paporo Motorsport Ferrari of Emiliano Lopez and Matheus Russo. Thumbs up from Lopez. Another car that will be in contention from 7th on the grid is the Balfe Motorsport Ferrari of Sean Balfe and Phil Keane. They were very well poised yesterday, but delay with getting the refuelling nozzle in really cost them. 8th on the grid is Felipe Barrieroth, and he was in fine form and really challenging. 9th on the grid, another home entry, Luis Silva and Antonio Coimbra in the Sport & U Gullwing Mercedes. And alongside them is the Veloso Motorsport Porsche of Pedro Marieroth, who will hand over to Nuno Baptista as the race unfolds. So the grid is cleared, the start-up signal is given to the drivers, and we can look at the grid in full. So that ultra-competitive front row of Balzan and Parente, that is going to be quite something into turn 1, particularly if Alvaro Barber or Michele Rugolo gets a flyer from the second row of the grid. Ezequiel Perez-Compenac and Emiliano Lopez are going to be thinking about the long game here, as you would suspect is Sean Balfe and Felipe Barrieroth. Then we've got Luis Silva and Pedro Marieros, 2 home favourites. Ilya Melnikov, we're disappointed with 11th place, and the Nova driver Audi at the back of the grid of Joel Comathius and Cesar Campanico should not be discounted, because that car was very well poised to challenge for victory yesterday until mechanical failures intervened right at the start of Comathius' stint. So the field about to set off on their formation lap. Alessandro Balzan leads the field away on the final sighting lap in advance of this 60-minute race, the 4th race of the GTOpen season. As ever, there is the mandatory pit stop that comes midway through the race, and the pit window opens when we're 24 minutes into the race. It closes when we are 36 minutes in. And of course, in the International GTOpen, the way that performance is equalised is with the success handicap added to the pit stop time. So it's a minimum pit stop time of 65 seconds. But then, in the case of Perez-Compenac and Giammaria, they've got an extra 20 seconds in the pits. What that means is that we really have a race of 2 halves. Frenetic dicing often, because the cars are so evenly matched in the early stages, and then the chasing down of gaps and defending a position that we get a little bit later on. In particular, watch for Phil Keane as he gets behind the wheel of the Balfe Ferrari, and Raffaele Giammaria when he takes over from Ezequiel Perez-Compenac. In the early stages, though, I think we can expect to see Alessandro Balzan and Alvaro Parent trying to gap the field. There is Nicola Bonucci in the Valour Course garage waiting to take over from Balzan. All the cars are equipped with the control compound Michelin tyre, which has given us some excellent racing so far this season. Cars, a magnificent sight in the glorious spring sunshine here in Estoril. Though the anxiety beginning to build in other garages, that's the T.O. Martin Motorsport garage, as they await the progress of Alvaro Parent off the line. It's of course a rolling start. If you'd like to get in touch with us during the course of the race, then do so on social media, hashtag GTOpen, and any comments, questions, anything you'd like to add to the conversation, then do please get in touch. The field forming up side by side now, getting ready for the rolling start as they head through the Parabolica, which concludes the lap here at the Estoril circuit. An hour of entertainment awaits us as everybody has got their eyes on the monitors, waiting for the pace car to peel off, which it does now. The field rumbling then towards the start and finish line. We wait for the red lights to change. There will be racing for the fourth time this season, the GTOpen, and away we go. And it's a good start from Balzan, well away too from Parent, who eases across to cover second place from Alvaro Barber as they jump on the brakes into turn one. They cleanly through as Michele Rugolo looks to challenge the outside of Alvaro Barber and moves through up into third place. So Rugolo goes third, Barber drops to fourth. Ezequiel Perez-Compenac is in fifth, clear of Emiliano Lopez and Sean Balfe. So Luis Silva runs out a little bit wide in the sporting new Mercedes already. Balzan and Parent trying to put a gap on the rest of the field. The same as well for Michele Rugolo, you might suggest. And then that slight gap in the traffic to the fifth place squabble. So there is the AERT Lamborghini Gallardo in pursuit of the Ferrari of Michele Rugolo, who in turn chases the McLaren of Alvaro Parent through turn 6. And these first laps on Michelin tyres, always a little bit of a voyage of discovery. They take a lap or so to really come in, and that's why we see the cars slightly sideways on occasion. The field all safely through the opening exchanges. A little bit sideways there for Emiliano Lopez as he comes under pressure from Sean Balfe, and Balfe thinks about lining up the move to the inside into the chicane at turn 9, thinks better of it. Unsurprisingly, being the first lap of an hour-long race, and then picks up the throttle as Alvaro Barber looks to launch through the Parabolica on to the conclusion of the opening lap. And it is Balzan who leads the way. What's his advantage over Alvaro Parent? So they come across the line, it's almost a second. There is Miguel Ramos, who will be taking over from Parent as the race unfolds. Alvaro Parent, the 2005 British Formula 3 champion, 2007 Formula Renault 3.5 litre champion. After a single-seater career, reached a plateau, he has become one of the world's top GT racers, as indeed is Alessandro Balzan, the former Rolex Grand Am GT champion, also a former Ferrari Challenge Europe champion. Battle probably to watch for is the one for 6th position. Emiliano Lopez would appear to be backing up Sean Balfe, and they've got Felipe Barrieroth, Ilya Melnikov and Joel Comathius all in reasonably close contention behind them. Balzan knows that he's got about 30 minutes to try and gap the rest of the field. It's a 10-second pit handicap for Balzan. It's a 25-second pit handicap for Alvaro Parent, so that is going to be quite something to overhaul. What about Sean Balfe? He's got ghost of a look to the inside of Emiliano Lopez, but the Balfe Motorsport Ferrari has got no pit handicap to concern themselves with, and they've got the super fast Phil Keane to take over later on, but at the same time Balfe needs to stay in contention. So they shuffle uphill through the chicane. And also watch for the progress of the Nova driver Audi and Joel Comathius. He's there in 10th position, lurking with intent. And the slightly tighter, twistier circuits really do suit the way that the Nova driver team prepare the Audi R8. as they sprint along the start and finish straight. Barrieros under pressure from the sister AF Course Ferrari in the hands of the Austrian-Russian driver, Ilya Melnikov. Just squirming on the brakes, Emiliano Lopez, leaving himself vulnerable to a little bit of a challenge from Sean Balfe. Balfe, who's raced with great success on the Iberian Peninsula throughout his career, the 2004 Spanish GT champion. I know he's got a lot of friends and family cheering him on back at home this weekend. Already this battle has slipped to about 10 seconds behind the race leader Balzan, and Balfe, you can sense, wants to get the wiggle on here as he chases Emiliano Lopez through turn 5. Is he going to be in a position to challenge towards turn 6? Suspect he might be. He just needs to decide whether or not to commit to the inside. He looks for the move. He finds the space, or does he? Lopez sees him in time, gives him racing room, and Sean Balfe goes through and takes 6th position. It was a move several laps in the making, very nicely judged, and the Argentinian Emiliano Lopez has no option but to concede the place to Balfe. And now Lopez has to concern himself with the progress of the Portuguese driver Felipe Barrieros. Barrieros immediately onto terms. A great drive, Barrieros yesterday to 3rd place, but he is in turn being pressurised by Ilya Melnikov. It's in fact Melnikov who has got the better run through the chicane and is contemplating a little bit of a challenge through the Parabolica, but Melnikov might have the run now down the start and finish straight, and Joel Comathius should not be discounted behind. Another look then at the pass from Balfe. He committed to the move. Lopez was going to turn in, saw the Ferrari to the inside and realised there was nothing he could do. Well, the order in the fight for 8th place remains unchanged. Barrieros not quite able to close in present on to the tail of Emiliano Lopez. There is the Nova driver Audi of Joel Comathius, and Comathius, if you can get into some clear air, you'd suspect would be able to run a little bit quicker than he currently is. At the same time, because of the retirement of that car yesterday, they don't have pit handicap to concern themselves with either. Out of turn 5. Towards turn 6, Alessandro Balzan out front, 2nd clear of Alvaro Perren. A pair of them 3 seconds in turn clear of 3rd place man Michele Rugolo. We are showing you the closest battle on track at the moment, and it is a good one between the 2 Ferraris being hassled by the Audi. On lap 4 of the race. And these 60-minute races, they are in GT terms a sprint race, but speaking to some of the drivers after the race yesterday, they were really very worn out by the end of their 30-35-minute stints in the slightly longer 70-minute race, because it's very, very hot inside the cockpit, and with an even warmer ambient temperature today, driver fitness is going to be a major factor. So out of the Parabolica along the start and finish straight into lap 5, and Sean Balfe trying to chase down Ezequiel Perez-Compenac. He's clear in turn, Balfe, that is, of Emiliano Lopez. This train of cars just behind. No change in the position. There is the tall figure of Joel Comathius. Great to see Joel back in the International GTOpen. A new challenge for him this weekend, the Audi R8. We saw him last year, of course, in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. Comathius is a very accomplished competitor in whatever he turns his hand to. He's got this gaggle of Ferraris just ahead of him. And they're all lapping the 1 minute 43 second bracket. Here is our race leader, Alessandro Balzan. He is alongside Alvaro Perren, lapping in the 1 minute 40.5 bracket. And Alvaro Perren, Miguel Ramos, yet to have a win in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, but they have been so consistent this year, which is almost the inverse of Ramos's 2014 campaign, when he won more races than anybody else, but unfortunately retired from a large number of them. And Ramos, who has been runner-up in the last 2 editions of the International GTOpen, would like to be champion this year, and he knows that points mean prizes. So Balzan and Perren Cross line they come. Meanwhile, Ilya Melnikov still looking to try and line up the move, and you get the sense that Melnikov a little bit more confident maybe through the slower stuff. But then Felipe Barrieros just knows how to get the exit speed working for him as they sprint past the grandstand, which overlooks the pits here in Estoril, on towards turn 1, which is one of the few corners on the circuit that's really changed since we had Formula 1 racing here, all the way through the 80s and 90s. And then continuing to swoop downhill, of course, a lot more runoff than we had when Formula 1 raced here in Estoril. The bulk of the layout pretty much unchanged as Melnikov gets a little bit sideways, trying to be maybe over-enthusiastic with the throttle, accelerating out of turn 3 through the left-hander at turn 4. On he goes. The car's cutting through the heat of the early afternoon here in Estoril. Already, we're almost 10 minutes into the race. Balzan is our race leader from Alvaro Pren. Then it's Michele Rugolo in 3rd. Alvaro Barber in 4th, Ezequiel Perez-Compenac in 5th, Sean Balfe is 6th. We are watching the fight for 7th as Felipe Barrieros has closed right up onto the tail of Emiliano Lopez. He's bringing Ilya Melnikov and Joel Komathias with him for company. They negotiate the chicane with aplomb. Again, Melnikov just that little bit more confident, getting the power down slightly earlier. It means that he harries Barrieros through turns 11 and 12. All the while, you can see Komathias just lurking with intent, seeing how the battle will unfold in front of him as they accelerate along the start and finish straight, kicking up the AstroTurf. These big GT3 cars generate such a lot of downforce. And through the speed trap, tipping some 260 kilometers per hour into the start and finish straight. Lopez, though, saw yesterday was a pretty difficult driver to overhaul, proving to be the same once again. Today, he runs out a little bit wide over the dust and the grass, and then sets the car up for turn 3. Barrieros likewise just trying, if he can, to get the undercut, possibly out of turn 3 onto turn 4. Then the sprint along through the kink at turn 5. Onto one of the more obvious overtaking opportunities at turn 6. Barrieros flashing his headlights at Emiliano Lopez. And this group of cars all circulating, saying it consistently in the 1 minute 43 second bracket, means they're giving away 3 seconds a lap to the race leaders. So already we're on lap 7 of the race, and Lopez is 21 seconds exactly adrift of Sandro Balzan out front. And that could be really key a little bit later on once pit handicaps have cycled themselves through, because the task for Balzan, Pren and Michele Rugolo is to build as much of a buffer at the front of the field as possible. So there is Balzan, headlights ablaze, Alvaro Pren staying with him. Then we have the gap back to Michele Rugolo. Rugolo has got Alvaro Barber in the AERT Lamborghini there in 4th. Now this could play very nicely for Alvaro Barber, because he doesn't have any pit handicap when he hands over to Anton Neblitsky. Perez-Compenac in 5th, Sean Balfe in 6th. Then the fight for 7th, and Felipe Barrieros continues to flash his headlights at Emiliano Lopez, which, not unsurprisingly, has absolutely no effect whatsoever in Lopez wishing to concede his position. And we've got Ilya Melnikov, finished 9th in last year's Italian Porsche Carrera Cup in the scarlet Ferrari with the Italian flag livery. Joel Komathias still staying with them. And again, Komathias, knowing that he's got evenly matched Cesar Campanico to hand over to for the second half of the race, wants to progress if he can, doesn't want to risk the car in the process of so doing, because we're only 11 minutes away from the pit window opening, and that'd be the opportunity to possibly bring some of these cars out of this train. Complete the early pit stop. Of course, we'll see other cars staying out as late and as deep into the race as possible. Balzan and Prem being the obvious examples of that. Have a replay of Alessandro Balzan in trouble and being passed by Alvaro Pren for the lead. So what has happened there for Balzan? Is that a missed gear? Hard to identify, but Balzan was 3 seconds slower than Alvaro Pren, and he comes into the pits. Disaster then for the Villorba Course Ferrari team. And the narrative of the race turned on its head. Very unusual to see the car in trouble. Is it a puncture, possibly, for Balzan? The level of activity, they're checking the wheels. Oh, something's wrong with the balance of the car. But that work ongoing means that essentially Balzan has lost really any chance for he and Nicola Bonucci to challenge for the victory. Will plummet to the back of the order. So this promotes the Emiliano Lopez headed scrap to the one for 6th position. Well, this is potentially very, very good news for Alvaro Pren and fans of the Teo Martin Motorsport team, because it means that the McLaren is released into clear air and will really get a sense of the sort of pace at which Alvaro can run. Approach Michele Rugolo to 2nd place as well. That could play quite nicely for Rugolo and Passin Lathoris. They've only got 5 seconds of pit stop handicap time to concern themselves with, so a number of different dimensions to consider. We're only at 1/4 race distance, 9 minutes until the pit window opens, and it's Alvaro Pren who leads the way in Estoril, the Portuguese driver out front in his home race. And discussion on the Teo Martin Motorsport pit wall as Pren comes through, sets a lap time of a 1 minute 40.907. His advantage over Michele Rugolo, 7.1 seconds. Alvaro Barber, 9.2 seconds. Don't forget, this car has got 25 seconds of pit stop handicap. And where that's really key is in relation to Sean Balfe in 5th, who's 22 seconds adrift of the lead already. And then this group of cars in the fight for 6th, well, they're 30 seconds back from Alvaro Pren. So even with that pit handicap, Miguel Ramos for that with a good opportunity as Barrieros again shows himself to the inside of Emiliano Lopez. Maybe overcommits to the move. Ilya Melnikov thinks about challenging. Thinks better of the challenge though. And so they climb out of turn 3 on towards turn 4. Super scrap this, 6th place. And a little bit of shadow boxing as well, because the drivers know that if they overcommit to a manoeuvre, then they risk losing places very rapidly thereafter. Downhill through turn 6. The number of races potentially being really compromised here, because Lopez has got Mateus Russo, very quick Argentinian driver to pass over to. In the case of the 53 Ferraris, Francesco Guedes, who will assume command from Felipe Barrieros, and then Cesar Campanico in an overdrive rally. It's Claudio Zanvich who'll be taking over from Ilya Melnikov, so experienced drivers all. An opportunity for further progression. Certainly potential that for the Vapouro Ferrari, also the Barrieros car, and potentially as well an overdrive Audi. So we head into the 11th lap of the race. This is the 4th race of the season in the International GTOpen here in Estoril. Alvaro Pren is our race leader. 2nd is Michele Rugolo. 3rd is the AERT Lamborghini Gallardo of Alvaro Barber. And the team, a new entrant to the championship this year, really seems to have got that car working very nicely. In 4th, it's Ezequiel Perez Companac. 5th is Sean Balfe, and then we continue to focus our attention on the fight for 6th, headed by Emiliano Lopez from Barrieros, Ilya Melnikov and Joel Comathius. Luis Silva it is who currently completes the top 10, and unfortunately Alessandro Balzan only just now re-emerges from the pits in the Villorba Course car. A great pity. He is going to come out 2 laps down, but with points paying somewhere down the order. Certainly worth coming out, seeing if anything goes wrong for any other competitors, because we have seen time and time again that the odd point gains here or there can be so important come the end of the season. So into the chicane, added in 1994 here in Estoril. Turns 9 and 10 just slows the cars down as they climb steeply uphill before the fast swooping section at the end of the lap. And again, it's Melnikov who is so good through this final sector, but he just can't really use that advantage to launch that challenge on Felipe Barrieros, who knows exactly where it's important to be quick in Estoril, particularly coming out of this final turn. So he closes up once more onto the tail of Emiliano Lopez as they flash through over the line. And this scrap now for some 35 seconds back from our race leader Alvaro Perent, as Lopez runs a little bit wide heading into turn one. He moves across and cuts the apex just in time. Barrieros was well poised to gain the place. So we are approaching 1/3 race distance here in Estoril. Thank you for your company this afternoon. And this race, you get a feeling, is really going to crackle into life once the pit strategies have played through. If you'd like to get in touch with us here at the International GTOpen and use social media, hashtag GTOpen is the way to do so. As now Felipe Barrieros, get the sense, is getting increasingly frustrated behind Ilya Melnikov, or rather Emiliano Lopez, as back into the pit lane. Alessandro Balzan, whatever the issue was for the Valour course Ferrari, it's not resolved, as now Lopez slow out of turn 6 and Barrieros really beginning to lose patience with it all, looking to apply the pressure. We have seen one or two very brave moves into the chicane. Barrieros wanting to risk the car. This relatively early stage of the race thinks better of that. Joel Comathius just taking the opportunity to really close right up onto the tail of Ilya Melnikov. The 4 cars separated by about 7 car lengths as they head into the Parabolica through to conclusion of lap 12. Just 3.5 minutes as well until the pit window opens. Down the start and finish straight. And Lopez just able to build enough of a buffer over Barrieros, and then crucially gets the car stopped. Not the optimal racing line from Emiliano Lopez, but it is enough to keep Felipe Barrieros behind him. And then we have got the charging Melnikov, with Comathius staying in touch. This scrap now 40 seconds back from the lead. Alvaro Perent consistently the quickest driver in the race, lapping in the 1 minute 40.7, so that's a second a lap quicker than Michele Rugolo. Don't forget that Rugolo has got 20 seconds less in the pits than Alvaro Perent, and so that's going to feed out passing the Thoras with a very strong opportunity to challenge for he and Rugolo's second victory of the season. And that's the beauty of the GTOpen, the way that the performance is balanced through the pit handicaps really does give us plenty of intrigue. So at what point, I wonder, will these cars look to duck into the pits? You would suspect that Barrieros may come in quite early to hand over to Francesco Guedes. Guedes, the reigning Blancpain Endurance Series Gentleman Driver Trophy champion, and a little bit quicker than Barrieros, would welcome some clear air, as I suspect would Cesar Campanico in the Nova Drive Rowdy. So these are cars all capable of going maybe a second a lap quicker than they currently are, but the problem is, because training Ferraris as Alvaro Barber goes off into the gravel trap, disaster for Barber and the ART Lamborghini squad. It's brought out the safety car as well, with the car perched at the edge of the road, and that has completely turned the race on its head, because all of the advantage that had been built up by Alvaro Perent is going to be whittled away to absolutely nothing. They're not allowed to make their pit stops behind the safety car, and well, that plays perfectly into the hands of Sean Balfe. It plays perfectly into the hands as well of Joel Comathius. But for the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren team, after all that work from Alvaro Perent, 30 seconds is advantage over the bulk of the field, if not more. And that has gone, well, a real shame for Alvaro Barber, because the AERT Lamborghini was possibly poised for its maiden podium. But Barber, he got caught out and spun late on in yesterday's race. Didn't see what happened there to pitch him into the gravel trap, whether or not it was a biological or mechanical failure. But either way, a great disappointment for them. Alvaro Pren, having driven so well to give Miguel Ramos the best opportunity to challenge for a home podium, now leaves Ramos with a metaphorical mountain to climb. So 36 minutes remain here in Estoril. The field bunched up behind the safety car. This is the reason why the Lamborghini buried in the beach, and that's going to be a fairly lengthy extrication. So it really is buried quite deeply. Suggests quite a high-speed spin for Alvaro Barber. So that gives us an order of Alvaro Pren, the race leader, Michele Rugolo in second place, Ezequiel Perez-Companac is third, Sean Balfe in fourth, Emiliano Lopez fifth, Felipe Barrieros in sixth, Ilnur Melnikov seventh, Joel Comathius eighth, Luis Silva is ninth, and Pedro Marieros completes the top 10. Now, how is this going to play out? Well, at the front of the field, the drivers who have no additional pit handicap time is Sean Balfe and Emiliano Lopez, both of whom have got very quick co-drivers to pass over to. Michele Rugolo's only got 5 seconds to hand on to passing the Thoras, but thereafter for the Perez-Companac car, Rafael Gianria will have to chase down some 20 seconds, and Miguel Ramos 25 seconds. Now, Alvaro Pren has done a pretty good job of at least giving Ramos the chance to fight for a podium. So although the pit window should have opened at this stage, because the safety car's on track, they can't make their pit stop until the pit window has shut. So Pren has frustration of each lap feeling like an eternity behind the safety car, as we take the opportunity to enjoy super slow motion replays of the cars poised as they pitch up through the chicane. There is Rafael Gianmaria, yeah, of course, pit ready to take over. Can't quite get a sense as to where the car of Alvaro Barber has gone off, which corner it is. But because it's so deep in the gravel trap, it's not going to be the work of a moment to recover it. So we're going to have at least one more lap behind the safety car. In reality, we're probably going to have 2 more laps, and that's going to turn the closing stage of the race into a real shootout. And there's Claudio Sadanovic, or rather Francisco Guedes, to the right of your picture. Guedes seeing the lighter side of this as he waits to take over. Well, that's good to see. Alvaro Barber has been towed out of the gravel trap, is on his way, has gone a lap down as a result of that. The car will be full of gravel, but he will look to rejoin the train. So we are going to have one more lap behind the safety car, which is going to feel like a double punishment, really, for Alvaro Pren, because not only is the safety car whittled away his advantage, but also, more importantly, it is meaning that the race clock continues to tick downwards. By the time we conclude this lap, we're probably going to be at exactly half race distance. Well, if you were to pick a winner at this point, it is looking very good for Phil Keane in the Balfe Motorsport Ferrari. Keane, who set pole position yesterday and led in the early stages before delayed pit stop cost them. Well, a smooth pit stop today really would put the Balfe team in contention. Matheus Russo as well in the Vapouro Ferrari. That's the blue, white and red car in the hands of Emiliano Lopez. Also potentially will benefit. There is Pedro Marieros in the Veloso Porsche. We've been lapped by Pren, but not by Rugolo, at the point at which the safety car joined proceedings. So we should see the safety car returning to pits at the end of this lap. They're about halfway through. They're just arriving into turn 6 now. The fastest lap of the race has gone the way of Alessandro Balzan, but unfortunately the Valorma course Ferrari is pretty emphatically into retirement. And again, this is a race where they would have fancied their chances of at least being on the rostrum. So the safety car is in at the end of this lap. We'll then be seeing the opening of the pit window, and I would imagine that Alvaro Pérez will start as late as he possibly can to try and build any sort of advantage to overcome some of those 25 seconds in the pits, having done all the hard work early on. But the safety car, of course, absolutely the right call, because if you've got the requirement for recovery vehicles and marshals to go trackside on a live circuit, then the safety of them is paramount to any of the strategies that the teams would want to play out. So now with the safety car peeling off, it's the responsibility of Alvaro Pérez to pace the field. He's going to get a couple of bonus seconds here just by pulling clear of Pedro Marieros in the Veloso Porsche, and away we go. The race then gets back underway. We've got exactly half of the race remaining. They're all queued up behind Marieros, who ran a little bit offline and got caught out through the Parabolica, I think on the gravel from where Faro Barber had gone off. We've got several cars ducking to the pits immediately. Emiliano Lopez is one of them. So is Felipe Barrieroth, as Brent and Rugolo continue on their way. Perez Competent the same, and Sean Balfe. Sean Balfe being seen by the Porsche, and he has been now. The Melnikov about to be passed possibly by Comathius as they pick their way through the traffic. So we've got the driver change on. Somebody kicks up the dust. We've got 5 minutes additional to the driver change, so it was due to finish when there was 24 minutes left on the clock. It's now going to finish when there's 19 minutes left on the clock, so that in turn has a real bearing on strategy. So Matthias Russo taking over in the Maporo Ferrari, replacing Jose Perez Icart for this weekend. So the Argentinians race with great success in touring cars in Argentina, GT and prototype cars in Europe. Already, Prenz some 5 seconds clear of Michele Rugolo in second place. Ezequiel Perez Compenac is third. Sean Balfe is in fourth. The Melnikov fifth. Joel Comathius up to sixth place in the Nova driver Audi, and that car could really feature in the closing stages. Will certainly be a car that will challenge for the podium. Now, will we see Sean Balfe coming at the end of this lap? There he is, to hand over to Phil Keane. Melnikov, I suspect, will go on a little bit longer before passing over to Claudio Stanvich, but we'll see. They head through the pebble-strewn Parabolica now, and yes, Sean Balfe heads pitwards, so does Ezequiel Perez Compenac and Joel Comathius, so a lot of very quick drivers about to take over. Alvaro Barber at the very back of your picture as well heads to the pits. They all get down to the 60 km/h pit lane speed limit, which will feel agonisingly slow. So there is figure of Phil Keane, one of the UK's top GT racers, finished fourth in last year's British GT Championship. Cesar Campanico about to take over from Comathius. As Campanico hops in, same for Rafael Gianmaria. And of course Gianmaria has got 22nd handicap, so he will have a little bit of a longer wait in the pits than some of the others, but it's going to be fascinating to see the order in which they emerge. Meanwhile, on his way now is Francesco Guedes. Here is our race leader, Alvaro Pérez. Pérez 6.2 seconds clear of Michele Rugolo, and he's got the luxury here, Alvaro Pérez, if he wants to stay out for another 3 or 4 laps, because with the safety car, the extra 5 minutes to the driver change, that closes when there's 19 minutes left on the clock. So we're just over halfway through the 4th race of the International GTOpen season. And it is Alvaro Pérez who leads the way from Michele Rugolo and Ilya Melnikov, with the pit stops in full swing. It's Ezequiel Perez Compenac debriefing something to the Air of Course team. Clearly frustrated, possibly about being bottled up as he came in to the pit. So Prent leads the way. There is Rugolo in second place, some 6.6 seconds back. But what we're really keen to see is the order of the rest of the field, all of whom have now made their pit stops. So there is Kelly Rugolo rigging the neck of the AF Course Ferrari. He has got, just up the road ahead of him, Raffaele Giamaria. And Giamaria, very slow, coming out of the pits. He's getting up to pace now. Rugolo, though, in full rhythm. Meanwhile, Nuno Batista takes over in the Veloso Porsche. Alvaro Prent, our race leader. Now, what sort of buffer can Prent build over the rest of the field? He has been the only driver really consistently in the sub 1 minute 41 second bracket in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. He's coming up onto the tail of Francisco Guedes, who seemed to have got a little bit crossed up. Guedes allows Prent to put the lap on him without any particular obstruction. So Alvaro Prent en route. There is Miguel Ramos, ready to take over. And is Alvaro going to peel into the pits on this occasion? No, he's not. He's going to go on for at least another lap into the 19th lap of the race then for Alvaro Prent. So what is the order of those that have pitted? Well, it's Matthias Russo, who's clear of Phil Keane, and Cesar Campanico. That's potentially a very good scrap coming together, fourth at the moment. Meanwhile, back into the pits, Francisco Guedes. Well, we saw he had a little bit of a moment, and clearly something not quite right. This is their second pit stop. Oh, it's a puncture, isn't it? I think to the rear of the car. Yep, the AF Course mechanics getting to work. You could see the car was porpoising slightly awkwardly. A Michelin tyre is sought, or is it something a little bit more fundamental? Let's have a look. Well, there is the car minus a wheel. Spare wheel has been found, but that is bad news for Francesco Guedes, because he was in a position to again challenge for the podium. So Alvaro Prent leads, Rugolo in second, Ilya Melnikov is in third. Fourth is Matthias Russo, but he has got Phil Keane breathing down his neck in what's essentially the battle for the lead of the race, and they've got Cesar Campanico just behind the pair of them. And that's essentially the fight that at the moment Alvaro Prent is racing. The good news for Prent is that he is a good second lap quicker than Matthias Russo, so Alvaro Prent is going to squeeze at least another lap out of it here in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. The second car through the heat haze is Raffaele Giamaria. It's a very close battle going on between Russo and Phil Keane, fourth and fifth place. Cesar Campanico looking to latch into that as well, as Alvaro Prent back into the 1 minute 42nd bracket. It might just give the opportunity for Ramos to challenge for podiums. So Alvaro Prent can be substantially faster than Matthias Russo in the Vapouro Ferrari. It gives Ramos half an opportunity, but Matthias Russo now is up to speed, is going pretty strongly as well. Here's a look, meanwhile, at Antonio Coimbra, the sporting new Mercedes, taking the tight line through the chicane. So Prent has got time, if he wants it, for probably one more lap before he has to make his pit stop. And I suspect Miguel Ramos will probably be saying to Alvaro to do exactly that. Some more time that Prent can gain out on track. And Prent, just through the middle section of the lap, was a second quicker than Matthias Russo. Russo and Phil Keane engaged in quite a good battle, or just about to engage the battle. They're separated by about a second or so. So across the line comes Alvaro Prent and gives us a 1 minute 40.8, so 1.2 seconds quicker than Russo, who's at the head of the queue of the cars that have already pitted. Into the pits now comes Michele Rugolo to hand over to Passin Lethoras. It's an agonisingly slow run. Down to, yeah, of course, pit. Rugolo jumps out. Lethoras hops in to the Ferrari now. Where will he emerge into the queue? That is the question. Trent's going to have to pit at the end of this, the 22nd lap of the race. And that safety car, whilst whittling away much of Trent's advantage, it has still allowed Alvaro a good 10 minutes again of clear air to try and build a bit of a buffer. The other driver who's really flying is Raffaele Giammaria in the 1 minute 40-second bracket. So Giammaria, who is 5th of the cars that have made their pit stops, currently pretty much the fastest car in the race, and he's 2 seconds a lap quicker than Matthias Russo, who's at the head of the queue of those that have pitted. He's only 14 seconds back, so there's time for Giammaria possibly to make progress. Meanwhile, out of the pits comes Passin Lethoras. So Lethoras is on his way. Now, where is he in the queue? As Parent again heads into the pit lane, gets the car slowed at the last possible instant to the 60 km/h pit lane speed limit, but they have got the additional 25 seconds to worry themselves with. So a halt. Ramos opens the door almost before the car is at a stop. Parent is out, Ramos gets in. This will now feel like pretty much the longest pit stop in Miguel Ramos's career. As he gets strapped in, the progress of Passin Lethoras and Matthias Russo is possibly going to be battle to watch. Also in, so here is Passin Lethoras. Now, where is he? Oh, he's just ahead of Matthias Russo. So this is the battle for the lead of the race of those that have made their pit stops. They're racing the stationary McLaren, and Matthias Russo, they've got Phil Keane just in behind them as well. And can Russo find a way past Lethoras? It's going to be a big ask for Passin to defend for 19 minutes or so, but he might just be able to do it as the pit window closes. And this is, to all intents and purposes, the fight for the lead, depending on where Miguel Ramos comes into the fray. But Russo's got a super run coming onto the start and finish straight, and Lethoras defending already into turn one, hugging the inside of the road, waiting to see where Matthias Russo goes. Russo looks to the outside. Lethoras continues to hug the inside of the road. Ramos, you could see, static in the pit lane. So this is the fight for the lead. And as Lethoras and Russo fight, it's going to give Phil Keane the opportunity to maybe close up. And Lethoras leaving it quite late to close the door. And you get a feeling it's only a matter of time before Matthias Russo finds a way past the AF Course Ferrari, passing Lethoras. But Lethoras, if he can slow Russo's exit speed, it's going to make it difficult for the Argentinian to find a way through. There in the back of the shot is Phil Keane. He has got Cesar Campanico closing in, and all of them are being caught by Raffaele Giammaria. So one side, then the other for Matthias Russo. Great racing this, as the race now really comes alive as we head into the final third. And the pit strategies are played out. Passin Lethoras winning in Paul Ricard, but a little bit more comfortable was his advantage than this. But for the queue of cars behind, what they really want is this battle to continue for at least another lap or so, allow the gaps to be whittled down. And Lethoras, if he sticks to the racing line, manages Russo's exit speed, it's going to make it very difficult for the Argentinian. But Russo looks to draw alongside through turn 11. Lethoras has got the inside line for turn 12. Russo then looks for the switchback, will challenge the outside into the Parabolica. Great racing, the two Ferraris almost side by side, but instead Matthias Russo plays the long game. He knows what he needs to do, and that's get the exit speed from the Parabolica onto the start and finish straight, get into the slipstream behind Passin Lethoras. The Mavoro team watch from the pit wall as their man Matthias Russo looks to challenge Passin Lethoras in the AF Course Ferrari for the lead of the race. for Lethoras. He just cannot afford, for 70 minutes of racing, to make a single error, but he does. He slithers wide, and that's the opportunity that Russo was looking for. It took a lap to prize the opening, but into the lead of the race goes Matthias Russo. But now Lethoras looks to fight back immediately. He's going to try and force Matthias Russo to be defensive. It means that Phil Keane and Cesar Campanico have closed up onto the dueling Ferraris at the front of the field. But now that Russo is through and clear, can he break away? And also, how quickly can those behind find a way past? The car they've really got to be mindful, cars they've got to be mindful of here are Gia Maria and Ramos. So the order post pit stop is Matthias Russo leads, passing Lethoras is second, Phil Keane is third, Cesar Campanico is fourth in the overdrive Rowdy, fifth is the sporting new Mercedes of Antonio Coimbra, sixth is the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren of Edgar Ramos, seventh is Raffaele Gia Maria in the AF Course Ferrari. And those 7 cars separated by 12 seconds, and Gia Maria is a good couple of seconds a lap quicker than all of the cars up ahead of him. But he has a lot of traffic to work through. There you can see the very back of your picture, Gia Maria and Ramos picking their way through the chicane. And only now can passing Lethoras get into the rhythm he wants to establish. Across the line comes Matthias Russo. 1 minute 42.1, 1 minute 43.7 for Lethoras, 1 minute 42.6 for Phil Keane. Phil Keane immediately on to terms with passing Lethoras, the pair of them rivals in the British GT Championship last year. Raffaele Gia Maria is also right up behind Miguel Ramos, as Kelly Rugolo watches from the pit wall. Lethoras just a little bit offline. Phil Keane making inexorable progress. All the while they can see Matthias Russo sprinting clear in front of them. So Russo in the Vapouro Ferrari building a handy advantage as this battle for second place continues. 14 minutes and change left in the race. Phil Keane headlights ablaze in pursuit of passing Lethoras in the battle for second position. The other battle to watch for is that Miguel Ramos has been caught by Raffaele Gia Maria as they battle for 6th and 7th place. And that's significant just because of the pace of Gia Maria relative to the rest of the field. And there you can see at the very back of the picture, Gia Maria right up behind Miguel Ramos. Here they come out of the chicane. And at what point can Gia Maria make his move? Miguel Ramos, though, is utterly unflappable. He is right at the foremost of the drivers in the International GTOpen who can absorb all the pressure that's thrown at him. And there is Ezequiel Perez-Compenac watching in frustration because this battle, Gia Maria can get past Ramos, could play Gia Maria to challenge for the lead of the race, but Gia Maria not really close enough to Ramos as they head through turn 1. All the while, though, they are rapidly reeling in Antonio Coimbra, but Coimbra in the sporting new Mercedes, having one of his career best races in the International GTOpen. Also, Coimbra and Luis Silva heading for the GTAM trophy for the top all amateur driver pairing. There is the Mercedes. And this battle taking place 10 seconds adrift of the race leader, Matthias Russo. And despite the fact that Gia Maria is being delayed a little bit here by Miguel Ramos, they're still a good second a lap quicker than all the cars that they're pursuing. So they are closing up on the fight for second place. As Miguel Ramos just looks to manage the apex through turn 7 on through 8 into the chicane, and Gia Maria contemplates a little bit of a launch to the inside of Miguel Ramos, thinks better of it. But at what point will he be able to force the manoeuvre? Because if he wants to win this one, or even get onto the podium, he needs to clear Ramos imminently, and then scythe through the rest of the traffic in fairly short order. Out front, though, Matthias Russo lapping the 1 minute 48.8 second bracket. Leads the way. Second place passing the Thoras, just clear of Phil Keane, still defending his position. Then we've got Cesar Campanico in fourth, fifth Antonio Coimbra, and then this fight for sixth and seventh position. Maria, knowing the championship battle is very close as well. They came into the race only 8 points adrift of Ramos and Perent. Doesn't want to risk retirement over chancing his arm. Here is the race leader, Matthias Russo. Then we've got the battle for second, third and fourth, and Phil Keane struggling to exert the pressure really onto passing the Thoras, with Campanico in fourth. This group of cars all in the 1 minute 42.7 second bracket, and the Ramos and Maria battle about a second lap quicker than that, as the Thoras looks to put the lap on Manuel Jose Castro. I'm not sure, quite realised that Phil Keane was there. Doesn't really delay their battle too much, other than it takes away a potential opportunity for Phil Keane to catch the Thoras by surprise. They all jinked through the chicane. And this is starting to look very good for the Baporo Motorsport Ferrari team. Matthias Russo on his International GTOpen debut, alongside Emiliano Lopez. The safety car has helped him a little bit, as did that redoubtable defence from Lopez. And now Russo is the best part of 4 seconds clear of the battle for second position at the head of the field. And the fight for second is all closing up on itself. We could soon be treated to a 6-way fight, because Miguel Ramos closing up onto the tail of Antonio Coimbra. And last time around, Ramos and Maria were 2 seconds quicker than the Thoras and Keane. So they have got time to close in. It depends what they can do about the Mercedes. It also really depends, I think, just how much either driver is prepared to risk the car to the potential detriment of championship points. 9 minutes and 20 seconds remain. Flashing his headlights is Miguel Ramos, just to remind Antonio Coimbra that he's there, but Coimbra fighting for overall race position has absolutely no obligation to move aside or make it at all easy for Miguel Ramos. There is the potential of an outright podium on the cards here. Head through turn 7, you don't really know where to look. You've got this 3-way fight for second place, which is being really governed by the pace of passing the Thoras, who's not making mistakes, he's just a little bit slower. And then you've got the next fight, as Miguel Ramos has found a way into 5th place past Antonio Coimbra. It's the turn of Raffaele Maria to try and do it as quickly as he can, but the Mercedes sticks to the inside, and that is going to delay Maria just a little bit. It gives Miguel Ramos the first opportunity to really challenge. Ezequiel Perez Companac potentially slightly frustrated, but of course Ferrari maybe doesn't quite have the straight line speed of the McLaren it was battling with, or indeed the Mercedes that he's trying to overhaul. A flash of the headlights from Maria. Headlights permanently ablaze for the Balf Ferrari of Phil Keane. In pursuit of the Thoras, they've got Cesar Campanico, that ever-present shadow in the Nova Drive Rowdy. That was a better lap, by the way, from the Thoras, 1 minute 42.7. Matthias Russo in the lead of the race, 1 minute 41.8, and you can see that Russo now 5 seconds clear of the fight behind, with 7¼ minutes to go, or 7¾ minutes to go rather, en route to the win. Here comes Miguel Ramos, and Ramos is a good second lap quicker than the fight ahead of it, as Maria is still thwarting his efforts to find a way past Antonio Coimbra. This is one of the real challenges of the Estoril circuit. It's not quite as new as some of the tracks that we race on, and therefore is a slightly narrower circuit. Overtaking is that little bit harder, particularly as the corners really do flow one after another. So can Miguel Ramos achieve the impossible and get the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren onto the outright rostrum? He's certainly going to close up onto this battle for second position between now and the checker flag, as the Thoras runs out to the very edge of the racing line through the parabolica. Across the line they come into lap 30. And Russo, that wasn't such a good lap from Matthias Russo. It was a better lap, in fact, from passing the Thoras, 1:42.1. So it just gives him a little bit of breathing space over Phil Keane. As Keane closes up on the brakes again into turn 3. All the while, though, they have got Miguel Ramos just beginning to eat away at their advantage. Gia Maria is still frustrated behind Antonio Coimbra in 7th position. So there is Ramos, but this fight for second, it's never really quite kicked on. As Phil Keane was able to close quickly onto the Thoras, but he's not been able to progress much further since then. So Matthias Russo, the race leader, then passing the Thoras, then Phil Keane, just out over the AstroTurf, kicks it up a little bit. In 4th, it's Cesar Campanico. 5th, Miguel Ramos. 6th, still Antonio Coimbra, the GTOpen trophy leader from Raffaele Gia Maria. Zdanovic, who is in 8th place, just clear of Francisco Guedes and Anton Neblitsky. Heading towards the final 5 minutes in Estoril. We've probably got time for 3, maybe 4 more laps. And can Phil Keane force that mistake from passing the Thoras? The Thoras, they're having another solid lap. In fact, a little bit quicker than Matthias Russo. And Russo, maybe he's just eased off the pace a little bit, but he is coming back towards this trainer cars fighting for second place. And what about Miguel Ramos? Ramos, again, a good second quicker as finally Gia Maria makes the pass. Antonio Coimbra had a little bit of a moment. So Phil Keane closing up onto the Thoras again. And Phil Keane, the fastest speed through the speed trap of anybody in the race so far. 262.8 kilometres an hour in the tow behind passing the Thoras. And now Phil Keane building up for that late challenge. And it's possibly because last time around, Miguel Ramos was a second quicker than passing the Thoras and is well on course to make this a 4-way battle for the last 2 spots on the podium. And the Thoras now really being harried by Phil Keane, who has possibly saved a little bit of life in his Michelin tyres for these last few laps, knowing that the win isn't really possible. What progress can he make? Here comes Miguel Ramos as well, looking to join in behind his compatriot Cesar Campanico. But where can Phil Keane find a way through? This is the problem. The 2 Ferraris got very similar characteristics around the lap. It possibly gives the opportunity for the McLaren or the Audi, slightly different performance characteristics, to catch the Ferraris by surprise if necessary. We're coming to the end of lap 31. We're going to go into just about the penultimate lap of the race. It's going to be a very closely run thing, as across the line now for Russo, 1:42.5. It was a 1:43.3 from the Thoras. It means that Miguel Ramos has well and truly brought that gap down. And now, how can passing the Thoras respond to the pressure from Phil Keane? Well, some say Phil Keane is one of the best GT racers in Great Britain. And although he's probably best known for his exploits in Porsches, he's pretty handy in a Ferrari as well, as he closes up onto the tail of the Thoras. And now we've got this 4-car train for second place. Brilliant racing as we head into the latter stages, as the Thoras has to drive a wide car. Campanico and Ramos are there and ready to pounce, and Cesar Campanico having to defend already from Miguel Ramos, who thinks about lining up the move into turn 6. And this is the problem. Just as the cars come together, Campanico defends. It gives Phil Keane breathing space, and it also just splits the group. We've got Gia Maria as well, closing in onto this whole train of cars to the tune of about 2 seconds a lap. Now, can Ramos possibly make the move into the chicane at turn 9? Doesn't quite trust the braking of McLaren to do that. So it's almost going to be 5 cars into the last lap of the 4th race of the International GTOpen season. Matthias Russo and Emiliano Lopez looking very good for the race win, but second place, it could be any one of 4, even 5 cars, you would venture. So across the line has gone now Matthias Russo. He goes into the last lap of the race. What about the fight for second? Phil Keane closing up on 2, passing the Thoras, heading down towards turn 1, but he's not quite close enough to challenge. The same goes for Miguel Ramos in his pursuit at Cesar Campanico, out of turn 1, downhill towards turn 2, and again, Keane just not quite close enough to really harry the Thoras. They have got traffic in the form of Nuno Batista, possibly to contend with between now and the checkered flag, and that would certainly make it interesting. It's now all about technique through the corners. Who is able to carry that corner exit speed? The 2 Ferraris, of course, similar acceleration for both of them. And here comes Gia Maria as well. Phil Keane not even quite close enough to have a little bit of a lunge, and Nuno Batista sees them coming, possibly compromises Phil Keane's pace through turn 6. Doesn't really affect anybody else. Good driving from the Porsche, showing great awareness of those around. So which of this queue, if any of them, is going to take that risk on the last lap and try and make the manoeuvre? The move into the chicane is possibly one that could be done, but it won't happen. They all filter through. The 5 cars covered by 6 car lengths. They climb uphill. There's just a couple of corners remaining. Is anybody going to be close enough to challenge? I don't think Phil Keane is. Maybe Miguel Ramos. As for Matthias Russo, he accelerates out of the final turn. He and Emiliano Lopez for Vaporo Motorsport win the 4th round of the 2015 International GTOpen. A great drive from then. Passing the Thoras withstands the pressure. He and Michele Rugolo take 2nd. Phil Keane and Sean Balfe in 3rd complete the podium, clear of Cesar Campanico and Joel Comathius, then 5th for Miguel Ramos and Alvaro Prent, Rafael Gia Maria, Ezequiel Perez-Companac in 6th. It's one of those races we could really have done with another 10 or 20 minutes as the cars all closed up on each other just as we went into the last couple of laps. But that should not detract at all from the performance of Emiliano Lopez and Matthias Russo. Admittedly, the safety car meant that with the field bunch, they didn't have a time deficit to overhaul. At the same time, Matthias Russo found a way past passing the Thoras, built a little bit of a buffer, and thereafter was unheaded. Another very mature drive from passing the Thoras. Here, Michele Rugolo continue their championship charge. And for Sean Balfe and Phil Keane, a great seasonal debut in the International GTOpen. The same for Joel Comathius and Cesar Campanico, as the marshals, I think, thoroughly enjoyed that, respecting the quality of the racing that we've seen in Estoril this weekend, because the drivers all on the absolute limit. So let's have a look then at the final classification. The win from Emiliano Lopez and Matthias Russo, 6.1 seconds clear of passing the Thoras and Michele Rugolo, then Sean Balfe and Phil Keane, completing the rostrum from Cesar Campanico and Joel Comathius. Miguel Ramos and Alvaro Prent, still the McLarens so consistent. Will they win in Silverstone? Perez-Companac and Gia Maria in 6th, and Antonio Coimbra and Luis Silva, our GTM trophy winners, and a brilliant 7th for the Sport and U. Mercedes clear of Claudio Stanvich and Ilya Melnikov, and then Barrieras and Guedes. What might have been for the AERT Lamborghini Gallardo, but for that spin from Alvaro Barber, they were surely contenders for the podium. And fastest lap is scant consolation for Alessandro Balzan into retirement. So Rugolo and the Thoras back to the top of the championship standings, just a point clear of Ramos and Prent, with Gia Maria and Perez-Companac up into 3rd, clear of Bonucci and Balzan. And Emiliano Lopez is beginning to close in on to all of them. Well, the International GTOpen has got a few weeks off. Next back in action on the 6th and 7th of June around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. Another very different challenge for the teams and drivers, a much more fast and flowing circuit. But with such a finely poised championship battle, it really is going to be an event to savour. And if you are watching us from the UK, do, if you can, try and come along to the GTOpen event at Silverstone, because it's a very friendly open paddock in the International GTOpen, and the teams and drivers always more than happy to have a conversation and a chat about the competition. Well, Matthias Russo almost overcome with emotion, possibly exhaustion in the cockpit, and absolutely immense performance from him and Emiliano Lopez. He gets out and celebrates and gives thanks. So delight for Matthias Russo and Emiliano Lopez, passing the Thoras and Michele Rugolo back on top of the championship standings. And Phil Keane and Sean Balfe, very impressive performance. And Matthias Russo celebrating with compatriot Emiliano Lopez. Congratulations between the two drivers. They put in the performance that they needed to. Thoras and Rugolo, that was a really impressive performance from passing the Thoras, because he was under a huge amount of pressure and barely made a single error. And he really is maturing as a driver as he gets more experience in international competition. That was hot work, the cockpit of those Ferraris. Very warm day. So we have a look back at our top three cars. Let's head down to Parc Ferme and hear from our race winners, Matthias Russo and Emiliano Lopez.
Eccolo. Poquito, solo poquito, que hable más él. ¿Eh? Todo español, que está toda Argentina viendo la carrera. So, Matthias Russo, Emiliano Lopez, first race together, first win. You want to talk in Spanish, in English? How was it?
Spanish, okay. Fue increíble, la verdad. Hemos hecho un gran trabajo. No habíamos probado antes de la carrera. Yo hace 3 años que no corro en autos y me subí directamente este viernes. Y bueno, siempre confié en tener la posibilidad. Emiliano ha hecho un esfuerzo grande también para estar acá y bueno, acá estamos. La verdad que fue un trabajo de menor a mayor con un ingeniero que solamente está sustituyendo a alguien en el equipo en esta carrera. Pero bueno, se lo debo a toda la gente en Argentina. La verdad que no tengo palabras para mandar un saludo a todos, que el esfuerzo que hice para acá, he laburado muchísimo, he conseguido mi plata por mi cuenta, por mi laburo y bueno, acá estoy. Hice una inversión de poder venir a una fecha y acá estoy. Veremos si vamos a la próxima.
Good emotion, that's nice. After 3 years not racing, Matthias Russo is back and winning. Emiliano, something in English, you must be very happy.
Okay. ¿En español o en inglés?
En español, está viendo toda Argentina.
En español nada, muy contento. La primera carrera juntos con Matías, la verdad que es un gran compañero. Y bueno, se pudo trabajar muy bien el fin de semana. La carrera fue linda, un poco complicado al principio por ahí con alguna tendencia del auto, pero bueno, pudimos remontarla y hacer un gran fin de semana.
Muy bien, chicos. Well done. Podium now.
Let's take a look back then at the highlights of the race, and it was initially Alessandro Balzan who led away in the Valour-Because Ferrari, and it was Balzan who made the early running with Alvaro Parent in hot pursuit, and then we had Alvaro Barber and Michele Rugolo engaging in battle for third position. Meanwhile, Emiliano Lopez was involved in a good scrap with Sean Balfe, but then disaster struck the Valour-Because car. Balzan slowing, having just set the fastest lap, and that was the end of his day. It promoted Parent up to the lead and gave Alvaro the opportunity to build a big buffer at the head of the field. As behind, Emiliano Lopez kept a queue of cars behind him in the scrap that really enlivened the first half of the race. But then Alvaro Barber, spinning into the gravel trap in the ART Lamborghini, brought out the safety car. It whittled away Parent's advantage. Parent, though, did keep going until the very end of an extended pit window. Handing over to Miguel Ramos as Matthias Russo in the Vapouro Ferrari was able to overhaul Passing the Thoros with that move. And that settled the race. So Matthias Russo out front, he and Emiliano Lopez scoring their maiden victory in the International GT Open from Passing the Thoros and Michele Rugolo in second. Phil Keane and Sean Balfe completing the rostrum, with Antonio Coimbra and Luis Silva being the very popular home winners of the GT trophy. Matthias Russo overcome with emotion in the car as the drivers on to the rostrum to celebrate. So Sean Balfe and Phil Keane to the right of your picture, Rugolo and the Thoros to the left. And then celebration time for Matthias Russo and Emiliano Lopez. Applause from the Vapouro Motorsport squad. Vapouro Motorsport on to the top step of the podium. The Argentinian national anthem then in honour of Matthias Russo and Emiliano Lopez as they celebrate in Estoril, victorious in the fourth round of the International GT Open, as we move on to the presentation of the trophies. Third place for Sean Balfe and Phil Keane. Runners up, Michele Rugolo and Passing the Thoros. Then it will be our winners, Russo and Lopez. The International GT Open is back in action on the 6th and 7th of June at Silverstone. Promises to be another thrilling weekend of racing, so do make sure that you join us live for all the coverage across the 2 days at Silverstone. But as the trophies are presented here in Estoril, it's almost time for myself, Ben Evans, to say thank you very much for joining us in Estoril this weekend for the International GT Open. Hope that you've enjoyed the action, and we will see you in a few weeks' time in Silverstone as our very close championship battle continues. But for now, let's enjoy the celebrations on the podium in Estoril.